Hello, and welcome to Herp A Derp, a podcast about breaking the stigma on herpes and empowering the community. I'm your host, Erin Devost. As always, you can review my episodes on YouTube or find the link to the channel on the podcast Instagram page at Herp A Derp Podcast. Thanks! Hey Herp A Derpers, I am with my first guest on Herp A Derp Podcast. I'm so excited. One of my very good friends and a proud supporter of the Herp A Derp Podcast, and as well has really helped me through my struggle in terms of acceptance with herpes and just been an overall great supporter overall. And I just want to welcome you and to really get into having the perspective of having someone who's also a supporter, but also someone who is really been involved with the psychology, which is one subject I've always wanted to really get into in terms of how to interpret our feelings and the way things that we go through. In this specific episode called Sexuality Healing, it's very... One thing that has really dawned on me the most is that, well, since I had my diagnosis, in a way, I felt like I could never, in a way, like men again, because I was just so hurt from, like, what my friend had given me, but at the same time, like, it had given me the perspective, well, who can I really love, but also who can I really trust? And Jess and I's conversation's really gonna help in terms of figuring out a course she took on sex and sexuality, and we'll dive more into that, and also the concepts she learned in the course and how we can kind of go through our conversation in terms of breaking the stigma on STDs and herpes, and how we can evolve that conversation into evolving sex and sexuality and the psychology behind that. So again, I welcome you, Jess Janus.
Thank you so much, Erin. I'm honored to be here. Just thank you for welcoming me to this podcast.
Well, thank you. I really am so happy that you are here. As for, I guess we'll just, dive in kind of thing. As I mentioned to Herp A Derpers, you had taken a class a few months ago, I believe last semester for you, on sex and sexuality. Do you mind deep diving into what you had learned and the overall concepts you've learned in the course?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am in a graduate program to become a licensed clinical mental health counselor. And so this class was an elective course, and what it really helped break down is just how difficult having conversations about sex really is, and especially our roles as counselors and having to sort of have these conversations with our clients about all different areas of sexuality, and the different, stigmas that come with, what we would consider abnormal or normal types of sexual activity or interest. So it really was a like a very inclusive course on how we can sort of our perceived issues around sexuality and the biases that we hold when it comes to sex, how we view sex as people, and then sort of how we're able to navigate conversations around sex with clients, being such a area of our lives that is so universal, but at the same time taboo sometimes to talk about. So it was kind of broken down each week from sexual dysfunctions, paraphilias, our beliefs, our behaviors, our values, and so it really was just trying to help us look at where we are with talking about sex, our comfort level, and then how we are going to be better equipped to talk to clients about sex and have some of those difficult conversations.
A little bit of backstory for me. So I even went to therapy to talk about having herpes and such. And has there been any conversation in terms of what you learned in the course that's been about STDs? And doesn't have to be herpes specifically, but...
Yeah, I will say, in the readings and in the context of the course, I did not learn too much about the STDs or STIs. I know a couple of students in our class had a particular interest in AIDS and HIV, so that was talked about a little bit. Talking to you and learning about your experience, I recognize that there's definitely room for improvement in that course and room for growth just in terms of what we know about these STDs and how they're affecting people every day, and particularly in our work with clients. So it's all very relevant, and I was discouraged as I kind of reflected back on the course to understand that was not included in the course to the extent that you may have thought, being a human sexuality course.
Definitely. Yeah, no, in a way that kind of surprises me too, because it's just like, well, sex is hard to talk about with anybody. I mean, it was hard enough, I feel, even talking about it, and even the way I was brought up having the sex talk, I was literally given a book. Like, I had no talk in terms of and I already had sex before getting the book. So it was kind of like, where was the conversation? Because we can rely a lot on school and that type of education more than having a personal connection with having either a parent explain to you. Of course, we all know that's really uncomfortable, but at the same time, coming from someone that we trust and know versus in a school environment where, when you're just in a class and it's just sex is on everyone's minds right now kind of thing, And so it's very interesting from that perspective. And what, since being a part of this course, how do you see it even kind of tying into your own practice and such? How do you want to mostly go with, I guess, sex victims as who you want to work with? Or what is your path there?
Yeah, so this course was a great sort of entryway to just starting conversations around it to begin with, and starting the process of viewing sex as, again, just a human experience that I think most people are at least engaged in. And it was very eye-opening because it was a great starting point and a great stepping stone to recognize where my biases lie, and the things that I might look at a client or look at whatever they're saying to me and bringing to the session, and just as much as we practice in counseling to be non-judgmental, it's almost impossible to not bring those into your sessions, because you're leaving a piece of yourself out of the room when you do that. So it helped me find this fine balance of, okay, why would somebody consider a sexual behavior abnormal? Okay, well, it could be a number of things. And so just having that context and that understanding around, where society comes in, where they view things as abnormal, and how that kind of trickles down into sort of our media, and then gets infiltrated into sort of our mindsets around sex. This is going to sound very cliche, but knowledge is power, and from that class, I will not consider myself an expert by any means, but it certainly helped me feel a little bit more comfortable talking about sex. We actually had to interview somebody in our class and ask them some pretty intimate details about their sex lives, and even down to masturbation and certain things that we don't talk openly about always. So just kind of breaking down those barriers and recognizing that it's something that we all sort of experience to a certain extent. And I think the more that we start acknowledging that, I think the easier it's going to be for us to have somewhat uncomfortable and difficult conversations around it. And for me, it's been just sort of a stepping stone and feeling just a little bit more open to having those conversations.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, because like I've mentioned, like it's not easy to really talk about, and especially to do it, from a therapy standpoint, like trying to break these questions out of someone for them to be comfortable enough to tell you, that's huge. Like, just like even telling anyone, just like how I mentioned before in a previous episode, like how to really be aware of how you have that talk with telling a person that you actually have herpes, and how you have to be very sensitive but also be very open-minded, which is why I give you so much credit for the profession you're in, because it's hard to not bring in sometimes those preconceived notions, because you're just like, oh, because it makes you think how you've thought about it before, but to think about it in a different light through someone else's lenses, like, that's so interesting to me. And just to ask those deep questions, it's because we ask them for ourselves, but to bring them to light, and especially in a therapy session, it's like, whoa.
And we are asking so much of people to disclose such personal information, and that should be such a safe space for them to do that. And I want to continue that work, but I want to challenge people to create those safe spaces out of those sessions and those dialogues where we can really start to accept people, but that comes with a lack of knowledge about what it is that they have or that they're going through, whatever the issue is. And so much of what I've learned about herpes has honestly been from you and this podcast, and all of the hard work that you've put into bringing such awareness to what this is, what this means, how a person who has herpes feels personally and experiences the world around them. So I think the more that we have these conversations and the more that we dig deep into these, the more that can come out of it. And we're going to be uncomfortable, we're going to say the wrong thing, we're going to maybe make mistakes, but it's in that discomfort and that uncertainty where I think real change is possible.
That was beautiful. That was really beautifully said. Yeah, because we have to challenge ourselves, we have to challenge society, but importantly we have to challenge ourselves to really put it out there, because these things are such a taboo subject, and it just always blows my mind how there's how I've mentioned before, there's so many secret groups that I've found, but yet they won't let me post my content on there because they're not sure how accurate it is in terms of what I have, or my podcast I should say. And just I always offer that we're there for people, and I want to be there and offer this type of support, this type of outlet that's different from anything else out there. So that's really beautifully said what you said. And also, knowledge is power. The more we know about it, the more we want to talk about it, and the more awareness that comes of it. It's really cool. Speaking of sex, what about the sexuality portion of the course? How do you learn? Do you find many people who are going through therapy have felt the way I felt, having kind of a traumatic event lead to question their sexuality in terms of, whatever, a guy again, or do I really like girls because they never hurt me before? I want to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. The course was online, which I think provided safety for people in the class to feel comfortable disclosing certain parts of their upbringing and their past, which I think was a benefit to the course. And we had people share that even in my interview, sexual fantasies, what things are arousing to you, what things do you find sexually stimulating, and just having a dialogue around it and realizing that I'm not a weirdo for being curious, being bi-curious, wanting to explore, wanting to step outside of this heteronormative kind of construct that we live in and we reside in. And a lot of things about a lot of my classmates discussed sort of their first introduction to sex and what that was like for them. And a lot of people had the classic birds and the bees, and their parents would have that conversation with them, and then it was kind of that one conversation, and then the rest was left up to them, and they were, you know, receiving information from movies and TV shows, and something interesting that I learned too are these sort of sexual scripts and things that happen in a movie where, you know, you see two people kind of getting into it, things are kind of escalating, and then it changes scenes. So your mind is kind of left wondering, like, okay, like, what happened? What does this mean? How am I supposed to act in this situation? Is there a right way? Is there a wrong way? A lot of the class was really helpful in trying to acknowledge that and kind of break that down. Like, these are in our society, and it's affecting us, and it's affecting you know, our sexual freedom, because we feel like we're trying to fit in this sort of really confined box of, oh, if they, you know, ask me back to my apartment, that's an immediate, or if they ask me back to their apartment, that means they want sex. I work on a college campus, and I just found out the other day that Netflix and chill means come over and have sex. So there's all these, like, innuendos that, you know, nobody's directly saying, oh, I'd like to, you know, finger you tonight. Like, so it's just like there's all this, like, guessing, like, of what this actually means, and is this the correct space to, like, be sexual, or is this a space where, you know, I need to be more reserved or kind of hide pieces of myself.
You did touch on a few points that I've been wanting to bring up too, is the perception of media and with sex and sexuality, and specifically in my case, herpes. Like, it's a very sensitive subject, but at the same time, like, no one really fucking knows how to, like, handle these, like, types of situations unless, like, you're really in person about it. Because we can visually see through, like, the media, the movies, even in, like, sex and health class, how we're just kind of like, oh, like, you know, this is how we should behave, like, nor do we see even, like, the engagement in terms of, yes, we do learn about consent and such, but how even comes down to, like, how do you, like, turn someone on, even to, like, that, like, concept, or, you know, even Netflix and chill, like, how the hell did it, like, come to that being like, oh, like, I'm on Netflix and chill tonight, when you can just say, like, let's have sex tonight, or something like that. Like, I don't get, like, we're going off in a tangent here too, but, like, I just, like, don't understand, like, even through, like, my sexual experiences, I'm just kind of like, you know, you're sitting next to each other, like, with someone, like, you've been, like, hooking up with, or someone, and you still can't make up your mind if you guys, like, still want to do anything. You want to, but no one's initiating anything either. So it's just, like, kind of like people don't really know what they're doing, really.
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah. And I feel like there's so many assumptions made, and there's so many things that are left to the imagination of, you know, how do I have to act in order for this to be received in the right way? And that is not the same thing as respecting the person that you're with. So that's a good opportunity too to kind of discuss, like, all right, what if somebody didn't know what Netflix and chill meant, and they thought you just wanted to hang out and watch a movie? So, like, where are these kind of assumptions and kind of nuanced terminology, where is that taking us? Where is that leading us? I see it affecting younger generations, particularly college students. So it begs the question of kind of, where is that taking us? Where are we going with that? And who's comfortable with that? Are we comfortable with that?
Oh, totally. And that made me think of another thing, is that with the person who gave it to me, I had come to find recently out that he had it for years, and he didn't realize it, you know, at the time, but then as, you know, years and years gone on, like, he thought would just go away, kind of thing. Never opened the conversation to anyone else that he's either had sex with or, like, come in, like, that type of contact with. It's just kind of like it blows my mind a little bit in terms of like how people can be uncomfortable about not having that conversation. That's something, you know, oh, like I got a sore but it went away, and to not think like to even like get checked out, which brings me to my point is more people need to seek out, you know, getting checked out or like talking to someone, go to therapy, go to a doctor, and to just really like talk out these types of conversations, because like the more we can bottle up in our head, the more we can get really tied up into our own views and based off what we have seen, but is it really right? And we have, you know, all those internal conflicts. Like I've definitely been there in terms of that before I sought for help during that time. I'm really glad that we brought into that. Mm-hmm. I know you're my first guest, but as a first guest question I'm going to keep asking my guests is what is the best advice you can give to someone who is going through having herpes, based off being a supporter and based off what you learned in a psychology standpoint and where you're going in your career? Well, overall opinion. Why not?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I thought about this question for quite some time. It's hard to give advice to someone when you aren't experiencing that personally for yourself. And I find that a lot of times with clients that I work with, you know, how would you understand? How would you know? And I think there's real value in acknowledging that there's no way that I can absolutely put myself in a place of knowing completely what that feels like and what somebody who has herpes is experiencing personally. So I think there's a lot of value in just acknowledging that right off the bat and being forthcoming with the fact that there's really no way that that I could fully understand your experience. With that being said, there's a lot of support around you just in talking with you and knowing the communities that you've tapped into and the people that you've met, just to sort of like going back to what we talked about earlier in terms of having these difficult conversations. Start talking about it. You are helping people so much feel comfortable and in a better place to seek support, seek help, seek guidance. It's there, and it might take you a little bit of time to, you know, find your network of friends, find your people that, you know, will always love you and always care for you. So don't give up. There are people out there that want the best for you and care for you tremendously. And so surrounding yourself with those people, you know, having that support within those friendships and those people, I think will be huge. It's such a tough thing to love yourself in any thing that you're going through, any struggle that you're having, just to love yourself. It sounds kind of corny and cliche, but in whatever way that means to you, just know that you're a person too. You're a whole person. Herpes is part of your life and part of your experience, but it doesn't define who you are. It's not all of you. It's one part of your lived experience in your life, one part of your whole person. So trying to maybe think of it that way and loving yourself through the process.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I'm getting chills. But absolutely, and I really appreciate your advice. And Herp A Derpers, you've not only been hearing it from me these past few episodes, but you're hearing it from Jess too. Don't let herpes define who you are, and also to love yourself. Like, that's something that's so important. And, you know, I totally understand, like, in terms of, like, you know, you not having it, but being the support, having that support system is all we can ask for. And so that was so beautifully answered. So I really appreciate you being here. Herp A Derpers, again, this is my friend Jess Janus. And yeah, just thank you so much, Jess, for being with me today.
Thank you. I promise that's the last time you'll hear me ever say fingering someone on a podcast or ever. So.
Hey, it's called Herp A Derp. We gotta make fun of something, so.
Yeah, I knew this would be a safe place to throw it out there.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much, Erin, for all that you're doing and just you as a person. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm gonna go tear up, but thank you, Jess.